Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CFES Brilliant Pathways ongoing webinar series featuring individuals, organizations, all type colleges, talking about careers, information for how to help you get into college. We've covered the gamut, and one of the areas that we think is one of the most important, and are very fortunate to have somebody who's a specialist in this area today that we'd like to focus more on is the FAFSA. I think there's a lot of questions about it. Why would I fill it out? It's a big world of questions. And like I said, very fortunate today to have Isaiah Ellis, outreach specialist with the Federal Student Aid Office, U.S. Department of Education. He has had a lengthy career. That is his current stop, and he's had other positions. Very well schooled in finance and a number of areas. He brings a lot to the table. So feeling very fortunate to have him here today. Quick shout out to John White, former colleague of Isaiah's, who helped who lined this up, and we appreciate John's help as well. So I will turn it over to Isaiah, and he has a great presentation ahead, and we'll have some questions at the end, but I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much for coming on, Isaiah.
Awesome, and thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this platform to provide information as it pertains to federal financial aid, and a little bit nuggets that I can provide to all those individuals that have joined us that are outside the realm of federal financial aid, that are helpful tips that'll help you as you're working with students, you yourselves, to may have some information, or so maybe in a position that you're going back to school in the process of repayment, different areas. So I want to make sure that I cover that as well. But the focal point of this presentation will be dedicated to the people and the families and the communities that each one of you serve. So just to start out with, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to go ahead and get into presentation mode just so we can start from the beginning and start from the scratch. And again, we're talking about the FAFSA, which is also known as the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. If you are joining us and you are operating within a cohort of students where you're following them as they're matriculating from freshman to sophomore, to junior to senior, this information is for you, especially if you're coming up on that now senior class. We're primarily focusing on the 23-24 FAFSA form. We do know there will be major changes coming down the pipeline as it relates to 24-25. We're not going to talk too much about those changes. They're still being implemented and they're still being ironed out. But when we do have information on that, we'll be happy to share with your leadership as well. And so just keep that in mind as well. So the areas that we're going to cover, just to bring people on the same page, we're going to discuss about the terminology. I understand that some of you may be my seasoned folks have been in the game for over a decade or plus. But if you look like me, you look like you're a little bit 25. Even if I don't look like I'm 25, I feel like I'm 25. So we're going to keep on going with that. We're going to discuss what to know about the FAFSA, what you should know after completing the FAFSA. We'll get into special circumstances that a lot of you may run into or you may be currently dealing with, and so forth. And I want to just drop some nuggets that you may not know. If you do know, just to be a little bit of a reminder, and please feel free to share with your community and also with your coworkers. And then we're going to get into some tools and resources. We have some that are new and some that we have refined and updated. So we're really excited about sharing those out as well. So first things first, let's jump into the terminology. But let me just drop a little note real quick. On the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a link. That's a resource link. So all the information that we're covering on the slide itself more information can be found at the bottom of your screen. So if you are interested in learning more about that particular topic, please feel free to go ahead and check out the more information at the link below. So the first four things we wanted to talk about is first, financial aid. An easy way of explaining financial aid is just simply money coming from places other than the student's pocket. Now, then we'll get into the details about what are the types of areas or the sources of financial aid. But if you're ever explaining to someone, hey, what is financial aid? It's just basically assistance that is coming from sources outside of the student. Now, when we talk about the FSAID, this is an easy way for students to sign the FAFSA. But also, as the FSAID is growing, it's also used to access an account. I will get into what that account means. It doesn't mean where a person is logging on to pay a bill. It's just to track the progress, to check to check how much funds have been dispersed into your account or the student's account. So the FSA ID is a great way to access that information. Now, students can technically submit a FAFSA without actually creating an FSA ID, and they can do so by the signature page. And which basically at the conclusion of completing the FAFSA, they can print out the signature page and send it in to us. The processing time for that is generally a couple of weeks as comparison to if you have an FSA ID and you're able to electronically sign the FAFSA itself, it would only take normally a couple of days. Also, if you're a student and you are completing the PDF version of the FAFSA, in that particular case, again, you're going to need a hard signature and submit it in to us because you won't be able to utilize the FSA ID, the electronic signature, in place of a hard wet signature. When we're talking about family size, we're also talking about household size. So you may see those terms interchange between, regardless if you're having a discussion with one person or another, but they both mean the same thing. These are all the people that the student or the parent is financially supporting in the household. And then lastly, you're looking at annual taxable income. That's just basically when they're submitting that information to the IRS, and I'll tell you a little bit about some great features with that too. Then that we're just looking at the wages and all the income that the IRS deemed is considered income or taxable income. That's what we mean by annual taxable income. So we're not meaning that, hey, if you have income that's not taxable, we're not referring to that. We're just referring to income that is considered taxable, wages and tips and things like that. So just wanted to set the stage before we begin talking about what to know about the FAFSA. So if you haven't dealt with the FAFSA in 4 years, there's been a lot of updates. If you deal with it every single year, there's also going to be a little small updates that you may not be aware of. But also for those of you that are sort of in that middle, I hope this information will be beneficial to you as well. So to getting started, we want to talk about some noteworthy changes. Now, some of you remember back in the day when you had to register. If you were a male under the age of 25, you had to register for selective service in order to even receive federal student aid. Well, just last year, that was an optional item. Now this year, we actually taken the item out of the FAFSA itself. So a student that is a male under the age of 25 does not need to register for selective service in order to receive federal student aid. Now, you may have also noticed that there's the question about were you convicted of a drug-related offense while you were receiving federal financial aid. That has also been removed from the question. Again, last year it was up as optional. We asked that students complete it and answer it honestly. This year, we completely removed that question. And on these first two bullets you see on your screen, we also removed any help topics related to it because once we remove the question, there's no sense in having supporting information about it because it's no longer needed as well. The last change that we have implemented for the 23-24 FAFSA is that at the end of completing the FAFSA form, students are presented with questions about that was really for the demographic. So we're asking questions about their race, their ethnicity, gender, and so forth. Those questions are completely optional. So if a student is completing the FAFSA form and they get to the end of the FAFSA form and they now is presented with these questions and they look at you and say, well, I don't feel comfortable answering these questions, they do not have to. It helps us understand who's receiving the Pell Grant, who's receiving other aid that is coming from us, so we could better these programs that are for these particular students in particular specific populations. So we want to make sure that, hey, we let them know it's optional and they can go ahead and complete it if they so choose, or they choose not to. On this particular screen, we wanted to just be a little fancy with it, if you will. So for all of my individuals that are 30 years and older, you sort of remember this as Candyland. So if you've ever played that game growing up, you sort of looked at the screen and said, that looks familiar. That's exactly what it looks like. We just wanted to provide you an infographic that you can use on your social media platforms or within your own presentations, a sort of way of guiding individuals along. And just like Candyland, you might be able to skip along to the peanut. Now, for those that remember are still playing it with your kids, you get that joke. But don't worry if it went over your head with some of your other you. It's okay. It's about exposure. So there are 8 steps to this particular process. Number 1, you heard me say before, FSA ID. That's where you have to create a username and password. Also keep in mind when you're creating an FSA ID, we do ask for your name, and the social security number has to match exactly as it appears on your social security administration card. So keep that in mind as well. Now, keep in mind about the save key that will be going away for next year, but that's the only nugget I'm going to give to you about the 24, 25 FAFSA form without giving away too much. The third step is completing the demographic question. That's just pertaining to their physical address. Now, I'm going to stop right there real quick, because once you complete an FSA ID, that information will also be populated onto the FAFSA form itself. So the student would double check, make sure it's accurate, and just keep it moving. The fourth thing is that they want to make sure that they're listing all the schools that they want this information to be sent to. They can list up to 10 for the 23-24 FAFSA form. That is, when the school gets the information, they will process it as long as the student has been enrolled or been accepted into the institution itself. Now, when they complete the FAFSA form itself and it has been processed by us, they can go back in, remove those 10 schools, and add an additional 10. Keep that in mind, because what happens is that when that's all sent off to the schools, they've already received their information. Keep in mind, it's not going to take information away from the schools simply because the student went back in and went ahead and removed those schools and added an additional 10. A couple other things too, make sure that you're providing your parents' information. But if you are a dependent student, and we'll get into the dependency status in a second, if you're an independent student, we only need yours as well. And don't forget to sign as well. Just also note that there's 2 ways that a student can submit the FAFSA. One is online, and the other is through the mail by printing out a PDF and completing it and sending it in to us. As I stated before, the easiest way is online. You can do so via on your desktop, your mobile phone, and or a tablet. For the physical copy, you'll need to print it out. If you have the right software, you can go ahead and enter into the fields, because they are fillable fields, and then print out the version where you need to go ahead and enter or provide a wet signature, and then send it right on in to us. Again, the processing time just varies between the two. A couple other things that you need to know, as I stated before, your first and last name needs to match what's on your social security card that was issued from the Social Security Administration, or as many of you know it, from the SSA. So if your name is Robert, we can't see Bob because it's going to bring back errors as well. So keep that in mind as you're navigating the FAFSA form. And if you're working with students and parents and you see that they put the incorrect name on it, or they're getting rejections because of it, you might want to also check the spelling. So keep that in mind too. And just to reiterate about the listing of schools, you can enter up to 10, submit it for processing, come right back in and add an additional 10. You can do those as many times as you want, but keep this in mind. The schools themselves will not process the information until the student has been formally accepted and or enrolled for the next semester. And I say that because you have students that you're looking into schools, you're adding every school you can think of, that's fine. And then you decide to go through the process of enrollment, that's fine. But for returning students, they have sometimes with these financial aid offices, they want to make sure the student is enrolled for the following semester before they begin processing their information. And that is very important to know as well. When we are talking about dependency status, we're talking about, do we need the information from the parent or not? We're going to talk about special circumstances in just a bit and how it pertains to dependency. But when we're talking about whose information we do need, if they're an independent student, we just need their information. If they're dependent students, then we're going to need the information from their parents. Now, keep this in mind as it relates to it. There can be, students can change depending upon where they are in their particular circumstance. Now, if we do ask a series of questions, are you under the age of 24? Are you a graduate student pursuing a post-bachelor degree? Are you in the military? Are you considered a homeless youth? So we ask these questions because we're trying to figure out where to place the student. So if a student's situation changes while they're in school or they're looking at their particular situation or circumstance and it doesn't fit one of the questions, we always invite you to contact the financial aid office at the school you plan to enroll in and make sure that you talk to them about the particular circumstance. In fact, you should be making best friends with the financial aid office at this particular time because they're going to be the ones to provide you all the information you may need in order to move on to the next phase in the financial aid process. Now, earlier, you heard me talk about the IRS DRT, which is also known as the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. It enables students and or their parents to take the information as they have submitted to the IRS that has been processed by the IRS and have that information populated onto their FAFSA form. Now, normally, it would take an individual up to 20 minutes to manually go field by field, checking out the help topics. Let me pause right there for a moment. When we're talking about help topics and you're completing the FAFSA form, we are referring to that little circle in the upper right-hand corner of the field with a little question mark in it. What you do is you take your cursor or you take your finger and click on that particular question mark, and then you go ahead and get more information as it pertains to that particular question. That's what we mean by help topics. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. Now, when we're talking about the IRS DRT and populating that information onto your FAFSA form, keep this in mind as well, that if you are head of household and other filing status, you may not be able to utilize it. But however, if you are eligible, it saves you a number of time. But again, if you need to enter information manually, we have ways to help you along with that, with the help tool on as part of each question as well. Couple things to know about your financial information. We do operate on a prior year. What that means is that you take the range of the FAFSA, right? In this case, you see on your screen what's highlighted in bold. That's 23, 24. We're looking for 21 information, 2021 information. If you're completing the FAFSA form for this year, that's the 22-23 FAFSA form, we need information that's pertaining to 2020. Now, an easy way of knowing which tax return information we need is simply by going to the first date or the first year in that range and minusing 2 years from that. Now, we do understand things do happen. And if they happen in your particular circumstance, make sure you contact your new best friends, the financial aid office, because they'll be able to provide more information as pertains to what you should be supplying to them in terms of documentation to support your circumstance. So you want to make sure you take that in mind, but also know there's an avenue just in case. Let's say you lost your job in 2022. You incurred a major loss because you may have had 2 jobs. You only were able to work one because there was a pandemic occurring. You may have different other circumstances that fit it. So make sure you contact the financial aid office because they're going to be your first stop, not us. We process the information and send it down to the schools whose responsibility it is to process these particular situations. So make sure you're contacting them and making them your new best friends. Now, on this slide, we just wanted to provide to you some answers to some questions we have been receiving based upon, okay, what if I completed my taxes and I went ahead and submitted, but my spouse is refusing to do so? In that particular case, if you are the parent, your tax filing status will be already completed. Now, let's say it's the opposite. Your spouse didn't already completed, but you did not. In that case, again, you're going to go ahead and complete already completed. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these scenarios, but you can see on your screens, if you want to take your phone out just for a second, I'm going to hold this slide here and take a picture of it because you may fit on the different buckets. So keep in mind, if you're one of these filing status, this is what you should be placing on the FAFSA. If you're a student and you're completing this information and you're just going to focus in on the first column, which is the if you are column. So you're not going to put in any information as it pertains to your spouse, especially if you're not married. But again, you want to make sure that you're putting down a right filing status, because what happens is that if you put will file and you actually already completed, then they're going to ask you for your tax returns just to go ahead and complete that. And as well as the funding won't be dispersed into your student account unless you indicated a more of a finite status for your tax filing service status as well. So keep that in mind. A couple things about the assets. Parents, if you want to let your parents know, it's about the funding you have in your checking and savings account. We're not looking for if you're completing the FAFSA and you're completing it on payday. We know that you have expenses. So what you want to typically do is look at the average 3 months of what's your average balance, and then that's what you want to place onto the FAFSA form itself. That's a good practice to have, because if you're doing it directly on payday, but you know you completed the FAFSA and then you paid bills, what happens is that number is not accurate. So you just want to typically utilize the average. What is your closing balance for the previous 3 months? And then you want to include any net worth of businesses. So you're taking the appraised value, and then you're taking the evaluation, and then you're minusing all the expenses, and then you receive your net worth. And that goes the same if you have any real estate. What we're not looking at is your businesses, 401ks, parents. That means you definitely do not include your 401ks in this. I'm going to say it again. Do not include your 401k in this. The reason why I'm saying parents, especially to some of you, because some of you are operating within 3 hats. You're a parent, you're a professional, or you may be a student. So you want to make sure that if you fit within this, or you convey this information to parents, that you want to make sure they're not including these assets, because that can actually increase their EFC. And their EFC is just an index number that is colleges, universities, the federal government, state governments, all used to determine what you may be eligible for. So if we had to put it in more of a visual, it would be a chart with the EFCs on column 1. Column 2 would be the program. Column 3 is typically the amount. So the smaller your EFC, the more funding the student may be eligible for. The greater the EFC, the less funding the student may be eligible for as it pertains to need-based aid. So keep that in mind, and why it's so important that when you're navigating through these questions, you're answering accurately and not including information that we do not ask for. For those of you that are talking to parents or students that may be in complicated different situations as it pertains to their parents, keep this in mind. A couple different things. If they have 2 parents, they're going to include information about both parents. If the parent has divorced, you're going to focus first on where the student is living more than 51% of the time. If you need to add an additional breaker, you're going to then go to who's providing more than 51% of support. This has to be determined by the family, not a professional. So the family are the ones who are going to make the determination of what parent is going to go on through the FAFSA form. Now, let's say you have a parent who's a step parent. Let's say you have parent 1, parent 2. Parent 1 and parent 2 got divorced. Now, parent 1 got remarried. That's where the student is spending more than 51% of their time. That's where the student is. That's where also the parents are providing more than 51% of the support. Then the student is going to also include parent 1 as well as a step parent and not parent 2. So keep that in mind when you're trying to determine which parent should I place onto this FAFSA form, or the student should be placing onto the FAFSA form themselves. People that we don't consider parents unless they have legally adopted you, brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, grandparents, and as well as individuals that are watching over the student, unless they have legally adopted the student as well. Now, a couple different things to know, just in case you run into these situations. There are special circumstances where a student can submit the FAFSA form without their parent information. That's typically if the parent has been incarcerated, they passed away, if the student has left home due to an abusive family, and if they don't know where to contact them. That's typical of students who are citizens, but their parents may not be. They may also be living in a different country and they're unable to contact them, or the student is considered a homeless youth. So keep that in mind as well as it pertains to the citizenship, as pertains to switching between a student is a dependent student onto an independent student as well. Also note that if a student is a citizen and the parents are not, that's not going to prohibit a student from receiving federal financial aid, because we do not ask for the citizenship status of the parent. So keep that in mind as well. I know that was a lot, and we got so much more to cover. So just as a breather, I just wanted to place a slide on your screen of the different types of federal student aid. These are sources that are coming from us. You have the federal Pell Grant, you have the work study, and I just want to take a moment on that work study for just a second. When a student is completing a FAFSA form and they decide to skip past the box that says, do you want to be considered for federal work study? Let them know that this is also tied to some jobs that are only set aside for students that check that box. What federal work study is, for those of you that may not be familiar with it and may be joining us for the first time, and this is your onboarding experience, well, welcome aboard first. So the second thing is that when a students check that box, the financial aid office is then going to put aside a set of money, what they may be eligible for. Then the student will come on campus, enroll in the courses, seek out the jobs that are only dedicated or for the federal work study eligible jobs. And then what happens from that point is that they're then hired into those positions and they're paid out of the pool of money the financial aid office has set aside. You see how it came around full circle? So let's say, for example, they're getting paid $100 and they would set aside $1,000. That means they have $900 left in the bucket. And they would just have to talk to the financial aid office about whether or not they can have that expanded to if they're working over hours and so forth. So keep that in mind as well. So we've determined the first section. Now let's move on what to know after completing the FAFSA itself. So first things first, student signs it, whether they send it in, whether they electronically sign it, they send it in to us, we process the information. We then send it out to the schools that indicated onto the FAFSA form. Remember earlier when I was referring to those 10 schools, how they can go in, process it, and send it right back? That's what I mean. We're sending information out to those said schools. They're then reviewing the information. They're only going to review it again if the student has been accepted into the school and or if is enrolled in the next semester. They put together an offer letter, or also known as a word package, and then they're going to send it out to the student to review. I'll get into some tools and resources that can be very helpful for students that are in that process. And then therefore, a student's going to make a decision. I just want to pause here for a second. Students, if you are just checking this out on a recording, and as well as our professionals, they don't have to necessarily make the decision based upon the financial aspect. There are a number of different aspects that fall into making a decision when it comes to a fit. But this is a helpful tool to sort of solidify your viewpoint or your opinion based upon the facts that you are collecting. And this is going to be one of them. So keep that in mind as well. Just to break out those types of financial aid programs, the grants and scholarships are just money that does not have to be repaid back. The loans are borrowed money. That's where students will have to pay that back. Work study is considered earned money. And then you have the college savings plan. If you are in a state that has that supports that you have that, you can utilize that to help pay toward the tuition and toward the bill itself, as well as if you, the parent or the student or the professional, live or operate within an employer that have benefits that they cover the tuition in other areas of the bill as well. Now we say all of that because it also coincides with accepting the award. Again, the students want to accept free money first. Okay, that's your grants and scholarship. Then you're accepting the earned money. That's your federal work study. And then if you look at the bill and it's still not covered and you need to take out student educational loans, please feel free to do so. But when you do so, just understand this will be not just for 1 year, but for another subsequent years for as long as you are enrolled. So you're not just settling and thinking about just 1 year. You're not just saying, oh, it's just $7,000. I just have to muster up $7,000 and that's it. No, you have to consider that it may be for year 2, 3, 4, possibly mastery programs and so forth. So factor that in the process as well. And again, we want you to feel free to explore other avenue as well. And you see on your screen the 6 bullets, and we previously stated on the previous slide. Please feel free to explore other options as well, because it's all part of building a house brick by brick. A couple things to know about special circumstances when you're completing the FAFSA. And I think that some of you are just staying on just for this one part. So hopefully I don't disappoint. First things first, when you're understanding about special circumstances, it's situations that have changed since you completed the FAFSA form itself. That's the first and foremost, easiest way to explain it. You also need to provide supporting documentation based upon your circumstances. So get prepared to know what documentation may be acceptable. Easiest way to do that, contact your best friends at the financial aid office. Now, sometimes you may hear me say FAA. That's Financial Aid Administrator. Okay. Those are acronyms you may hear along the way. You may see that on certain documentation. FAA, Financial Aid Administrator. These individuals, when they're evaluating your special circumstances, are looking to see if they need to modify the information you already put on the FAFSA form itself. So that may come in where they have to do a dependency override. They may look at the information and say the income is not quite right. They added one too many zeros. I know that student was working for a fast food restaurant, but how did they earn 6 figures? Well, if they do, please feel free to send me an email and let me know how they exactly did it, because I'm always open to a 6-figure part-time job. So they also want to reserve conflicting information. And again, if they're determined that the student is an unaccompanied homeless youth, they'll make the adjustment from there. Now, when a student is going through the FAFSA form on the front end, they are asked, hey, if you have a particular special circumstances when completing the form, if they do indicate that, then they can go ahead and skip the questions about the parents. Now, if they're just in a situation where the parent is just not supplying the information, then at that point, they're only eligible for the unsubsidized student educational loans because the parent is just unwilling. It's different from this first situation where they're fitting those four. Remember what we were referring to has been incarcerated, the student left home to abusive, they were unaccompanied homeless youth, those particular bullets. Yeah, that's where that question comes into play. And so if they are only eligible for unsubsidized loans, which in some cases students just selected because that's all they really want, then that's what they're going to go ahead and select. So keep that in mind as well. Just a little bit more information as it pertains to not willing to provide the parental information. Again, on your screen are what the special circumstances may be. Just to repeat the statement I said earlier. Again, if the parent is just not willing to provide their information, then the student will only be eligible for unsubsidized loans. So it's important that when you're talking with parents that you convey that part to them, because especially if the student is eligible for a Pell Grant, that may make the difference between them attending school and not attending school as well. And the schools may ask for documentation in the form of physical documentation and or the interview, just depending upon what the school is accepting at that particular time. A couple of things for special circumstances that are outside of the dependency part of it that are more financial. And as I stated early on, if you do have a change in your income, if you have a tuition expenses for other children as it relates to elementary or secondary schools, if you have medical bills that are not covered by insurance, if they're dependent cases, these things can be taken into account because it comes down to the cost of attendance and its impact on financial aid. Now, what impact does it have on financial aid? Let me take a moment and think just for some of you. Well, let me help you out and answer the question. Now, you have your cost of attendance at a said school, and that's the average of your tuition and fees, room and board. That's the room and board is the room where the student is planning to stay in, as well as the board, which is the meal plan, the books and supplies, the average of transportation costs, miscellaneous expenses. All of these elements make up what's called the cost of attendance at the said school, right? So let's take in this case, it's Ellis University, $40,000. That also means for this academic year, which starts July 1st, 2023 and sunsets June 30th, 2024, I can't receive more than $40,000 in terms of financial aid. So my grants, my scholarships, my student loans, all of the funding coming in has to add up to $40,000 and cannot exceed that. Okay, excuse me, let me back up. It can add up to $40,000, but it can't exceed that. Okay, if it goes to 40,000 and 100 and for 41,000, then the financial aid officer will take that additional 1,000 and send it back to the source. Okay, now if you are fitting within some of these buckets, you can talk to the financial aid office and say, hey, look, I have this particular thing. Can you increase my cost of attendance because we need that additional funding? Now, that's primarily important, especially if you're at bullet number 4 and you have some childcare and you're an independent student and you realize that you need additional funding to help just cover that because you need someone to watch your kids while your student is in school. then you want to make sure that you're talking to the financial aid office until that additional funding is not sent back, is actually sent to you through your account at the school. And so you could make sure you have that covered as well. So keep that in mind that the impact of the cost of the attendant has on a special circumstance. Now, if you do fall into an unusual financial circumstance, these are changes that happen. And this is when I was stating to you about that prior year, where in this case, we're going to talk about the change in 2022, because we're talking about the 23-24 FAFSA form. Okay. Now, if you, again, have any issues with the tuition expenses for other kids, make sure the financial aid office is aware of that. Medical bills that are not covered by insurance, make sure you make the financial aid office aware of that. If you have a family member that becomes unemployed, that you were using their financial information onto the FAFSA form, make sure you contact the financial aid office and make them aware of that. If you have changes in your income, including as a student or as a parent, you want to make sure you make the financial aid office aware of that. Now, I included 4 different statements. Make sure the financial aid office aware of that, because they are your best friends. Communication is key. You don't want to get to the end and then find out that you should have made contact with them because you would have been eligible for a said program. So make sure you contact them as well. Now, I know I covered a lot, but we're going to jump into some tools and resources that we have available to you that we're excited to tell you about. The first and foremost is the studentaid.gov. This website was built just for you. So when you go into studentaid.gov, you can access it on your mobile phone, on your desktop, or on your tablet. You can always even access the information as it pertains to your student account. This is where funding has been dispersed on your behalf to that college, university, or career school. You're able to track that, and you're able to do that on a dashboard where I will show you all the grants and as well as all of the loans that have been dispersed on your behalf. Since we, the federal government, do not provide scholarships, you won't see that part on it. You'll see it on your institution level, but you'll be able to track how much funding has been dispersed into your account, because there are aggregate limits as it pertains to different programs as well. Now, for my professionals, I said I was going to have information for you. So if you have taken out some student loans, you can check out our loan simulator. What our loan simulator affords you the opportunity to do is run simulations on different repayment plans. So you may look at the standard one and say, okay, that best fits my financial capacity right now. But you may look at, say, I want to start low and then gradually build up. You can do so as well. Or you want to say, I want to pay it off as quickly as possible. I want to pay it off within this set of time. Well, I want to start more and pay less over time. You can run simulations on your particular loans that you have already been dispersed onto your account. Keep this in mind. I'm gonna go back one screen. Like you see on the left-hand side, that's to be the loans that you have taken out. And then for this one is a little bit different because we stated 10,000 on the previous slide. I'm just trying to get you familiarized with it looks. When you're utilizing the tool, you'll be able to see, okay, I've taken out this much. This is how much is on principal. This is how much is the interest. And this repayment plan best meets my financial capacity. And you're able to apply for that particular plan through this simulator. So keep that in mind as well. On this screen is just showing you what it looks like, just so when you're navigating this process, you can find the one that best fits. But if you look at all of these options and then none of them fit your financial capacity, make sure you just simply call your loan servicer, the individuals that are responsible for communicating with you, and as well as are servicing your particular loan. So keep that in mind as well. For parents and students, we also have a federal student aid estimator, which is a demo site of the FAFSA itself. So it's a new product that we did release just last year, and we're excited about it. Many of you may remember the FAFSA forecaster that has been removed and replaced with the federal student aid estimator. You would not be able to submit a FAFSA form through this particular site, but you'll be able to familiarize yourselves with kind of questions that we're asking the students and parents in the way that we're asking the particular. So when you're conveying to the student over the phone, which is sometimes very difficult, saying, hey, where are you right now? You can sort of navigate through the federal student aid estimator to better understand the question that they may be presented at the time that they're sitting, completing the FAFSA itself. It also provides them an EFC at the conclusion of completing the demo site. The only difference is it's not going to send out that. If you don't know what the EFC stands for, it stands for Estimated Family Contribution. It's not the amount the family has to pay for their tuition bill because they have not enrolled in courses yet. They have not selected the room or board if they plan to stay on campus. It is just simply an index number that's used to determine how much aid a student may be eligible for. Just keep that in mind. And because a lot of times when students, especially if they're unfamiliar with the FAFSA, they look at that EFC and they're like, oh my goodness, it's $5,000. I do not have $5,000. But you want to make sure you speak to them calmly and tell them, hey, look, that's not the amount that you have to pay because you do not enroll in school just yet. So keep that in mind. Now, going back a couple, maybe about 10, 15 slides, and you saw when I was referring to what to do after completing the FAFSA. Remember that slide? Well, we're going to bring that back full circle. And that's why when I stated you just can't evaluate your options just by the financial part of it. This college scorecard helps bring other factors into play, such as the debt after graduation, graduation rates, undergraduate average cost, as well as enrollment figures. And that's taken into account for each school that the student has indicated onto this form. They're able to compare schools based upon those options as well and really find more information to better as they're making a decision as to where they plan to invest the next couple of years of their lives. So keep that in mind that the college scorecard is a helpful tool, particularly for not just undergraduate students, but also for graduate students that are interested in comparing schools one against the other as well. A resource for you all. Now, this is a nod to my individuals that have been in the game for over 25 years. If they can remember when their individuals going and completing the FAFSA form, they had 7, 8, maybe 16 pages of the FAFSA form. You had to complete it manually and send it in. All the folks that went through it, we don't judge. You're still young. It's all right. But this one, for those that are more of an automated field, this will also provide you how do we come to our calculation of the EFC? How do we take into account allowances as it pertains to your assets and your incomes? This is a good way to check out and how do we come to that particular determination of that calculation if you want to familiarize yourself. If you're just comfortable with how we come to it electronically, I totally get it. But this is also how I learned, how many of my individuals who are working directly with the FAFSA have learned. But so please feel free to check out our resource on the FAFSA on the web worksheet as well. And lastly, we are on different communication channels. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We're always posting, so like us, subscribe to us, follow us. We're always posting information as it pertains to different information as well. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to John to facilitate the question, any questions that may have came in.
Thanks, Isaiah. That was best presentation I've seen yet. It's
Oh,
very clear. Yeah, like I had a lot of questions. Almost all of them were answered within your presentation. But I could it's fascinating to me because I had 4 kids and did this 10 years ago, have another kid who's going back to school a little bit later in life. So to see the changes just from now to then is incredible and also really helpful. You declare just stuff, even the selective service, optional, raised channel, different areas that have changed, what you have to answer. The single big, most frequently asked question with our students around the country, you address, but it is, if I can't get one parent to fill it out. What do I do? Am I, and some of it is, and some are concerned about, some parents have fears about filling it out for various reasons. So if a student can't get one of the 2 parents, say, to fill it out, reiterate a little bit about your advice on that.
sure. If they can't get a parent and they only have one parent completing the form to put their information in, then they can only select that they'll be eligible for the unsubsidized loan. Keep this in mind though. Okay. If it's 2 parents, one parent can fill out all the information, because at the end of the day, when it comes to signing the FAFSA form, we only need one parent to sign. So just keep that in mind when completing the FAFSA itself, and they can only get one parent to complete it. You only need one parent. But however, if you're dealing with a parent that says absolutely not, I'm not going to give you information, and that other parent can't get information from them, then it's going to be incomplete FAFSA. And at that point, they're only going to be eligible for the unsubsidized loan.
Okay. Yeah. And kind of riffing off that, another question that we get a lot, and you addressed it again, is so parents get divorced, child stays with, say, mom, dad moves out, mom remarries. If it's 51% of the time, it's the financial information of mom and new husband.
Correct, correct. But I just want to reiterate that decision has to come for that family. So as a professional, we can't say, okay, you're going to put this particular family on it, because it could be a situation where, and it's been like this around the country, where the student may temporarily stay with mom and stepdad, but they really live with parent number two. So we want to advise for whoever that family makes the determination. And most of it has to be supported by supporting documentation. Typically, some schools ask for IDs. They ask for, okay, where is the student going to school? Is it realistic if they're in a zone area and the parent number two is out of state? So these are things that come to light on other areas, but when completing the FAFSA form, we leave that up to the family.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think really interesting is, I was going to text my stepson here and say, make best friends with someone in financial aid office. Because, it really is interesting I mean, people think, oh, you fill out the FAFSA and then you're still kind of dealing with you all. And it really does become the school that becomes sort of your financial, person or entity that you're dealing with.
Absolutely does. And most students that they don't understand, or maybe I should rephrase that. They don't know that sometimes you have endowed scholarships that come out of the financial aid office, or the financial aid office knows who to contact in regard to endowed scholarships. So it may be another department that administers those particular or awards those particular scholarships that can be useful for students that are coming in for the first time, returning to school, as well as graduate school. So they may not be aware of it, but normally the best place to start are with your best friends at the financial aid office.
Yeah. And I had another question. It was basically thank goodness was the response to the fact that the EFC number is not what they first see. It's going to go down once because it can be alarming to see. And you're like, how am I going to pay that? But that's not the number, right? So.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. You want to always wait to hear back from the financial aid office as to their award package, because you may see, like we saw, 5,000, but then there might be a award package to say, well, you qualify for a lot from our institution, from our institutional grant funds, our institutional scholarships, and actually your bill is zero.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It can happen.
That's the dream. Yes. I had another question on this student essentially asking, so you send it out you pick 10 colleges, you put 10 colleges down. And then, like you said, you can go back in, add 10, go back in, add 10. Explain that just a little bit. Are they all, I think the question too is the not until accepted, the package piece. The colleges gets this information. And I think there's confusion on, like, in the end, your cost after all of age, the actual cost rather than the sticker price. When a college offers you a package, that comes later. So you're filling out all these 10 schools and another 10, then you're dealing with the school. Then is the final package. That's kind of the question. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's aligned with just what you said. When you complete the FAFSA form and then you send it in, that's processed and then sent out to the school. The schools take that information. For those that have been enrolled and accepted, they'll take that and turn around and then provide you an award letter. And then at that even then at that particular time, most of the time it's just tentative. There are steps that people have to go in, contact the financial aid office and confirm and finalize their awards. And that could be where they say, well, here's this acceptance process, send us an email, check a box. They'll let you know exactly what's next steps, and then the awards will be finalized. But it's just in line with the process you have laid out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's the bulk of the questions. Let me just make sure. Yeah, the loan simulator and the estimator are phenomenal. That's getting thumbs up all over. That's awesome additions. That's extremely helpful, right? It gives you your reality check.
Certainly, and you're able to do so because, especially if you're in a sophomore, freshman, or junior year, you're able to sort of navigate to see, oh, what I want to see where I may fall at, or what my EFC may be. So seniors are at a disadvantage when they're going through this process for the first time, because they only have, in this particular case, for seniors right now, 3 months. For those that are preparing for next year, they have 18, right? But if the earlier you can prepare and get yourself in a position where you kind of know, then those other types of resources, those other types of financial aid, like the grants and scholarships, get a little bit better, because you can apply for scholarships for students that are freshmen in high school, that are sophomore in high school, that are junior, and then the funding will just hold until you go off to college, unless they send you a check directly. So you're in a better position when you're able to understand where you are.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you're really saying ideally you'd fill it out sophomore, junior year?
Certainly, we have schools all over the country that require students that are part of different programs to complete the FAFSA in their junior year, just so they can understand, okay, this is the plan that we're going to develop for you. And then we're going to require you to seek out a scholarship, or you're going to complete a college scholarship application every week or every other week, or however, however routine it is for them. Just so when the student is getting to that senior year, they're less worried about if they can fund or they can afford college. They're focusing on completing all the necessary steps to get to graduation.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a real more, we were talking earlier about Texas sort of mandating it, that all students do it, and there's other mechanisms for helping students, because really it's to the benefit of everyone to have them fill it out.
Certainly, from a professional standpoint, it's also helpful for the, if you're a career or college access professional, for you yourself to know what kind of questions are being asked to the student, because you're the first line. We normally get it when they are out of resources in terms of them contacting us, but typically as a professional, you are the first line, and you're going to get these kind of questions of, okay, the question number 57 is asking for X, Y, and Z. And so you may be sitting there saying, I really don't know that question 57, but the more you can familiarize yourself with the kind of questions that are being asked of students, the quicker you can provide the answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate, I know our school counselors, this is all really helpful information. Extremely well done. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. If there's, anything else you wanted to add, or if students might have questions, I know they have their own, the school counselors and everybody's doing the work, but I might pass some more on to you if that's okay.
Sure, students can always call us at 1-800-4FED-AID. And I'm gonna say that one more time, 1-800-4FED-AID. Because we are, you guys represent a lot of schools across the country. I could just imagine my own inbox if I received.
Yeah, we'll spare you that. Yeah, I should have thought.
Oh man, I'll be one popular individual, and one people be mad too. Be so many people to get to, but.
Yeah, all right, we'll push that number then. We'll make sure that. Yeah. But yeah, this has been incredibly helpful. We really appreciate it. We had talked about, you as 2024, 2025, these continued changes that, you want to wait till they're finalized and be able to talk. We'd love to have you come back, update it each year, twice a year. So if that sounds good, we appreciate it today, and we'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. I would glad to be back. I'll be more than happy to be back.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you again.
Awesome. And thank you for having us.
Okay. Yeah. Take care. Appreciate it.